Good morning friends and welcome back to Trans India, Real People, Real Emotions. I am Girish Meechandani and today we will be talking to a very special personality from the tyre industry. Friends, as we all know, road transport is a very expensive business. Rather, it has become an expensive business in the last few years with input costs rising faster than anyone would have ever expected. With massive road development happening across the country, the burden of toll tax is now in excess of ₹5 per kilometer. The bigger component in the road transport business, however, still is diesel. That's right, डीजल आज भी आपके ऑपरेटिंग कॉस्ट का 55 से 7% हिस्सा बना रहता है। और हम ये भी जानते हैं कि डीजल प्राइसेस में अगर ज़रा सा भी उतार या चढ़ाव होता है, इसका डायरेक्ट इम्पैक्ट ऑपरेटिंग कॉस्ट पर होता है और आगे जाके फ्रेट रेट्स पर भी इसका इम्पैक्ट होता है। Hence, it is no surprise that even the smallest variation in the price of diesel puts the transporters and truckers in a spot of bother. The other big cost for the transporters now is the cost of the truck itself. With India moving from BS4 directly to BS6, the cost burden on the industry has been huge. The OEMs have spent a lot of money in this transition from BS4 to BS6, and naturally the impact of that has been felt by the road transport industry. Friends, the other important component in the operating cost is tyres. While not many people may realize this, but tyres is a significant part of the operating cost. And once again, with rubber prices rising, steel prices rising, and of course fuel prices rising, the pressure is on tyres as well. दोस्तों, इन सबको अगर हम मिला के देखें तो ट्रांसपोर्टर की जो ऑपरेटिंग कॉस्ट है वो दिन ब दिन बढ़ते जा रही है। एक तरफ डीजल महंगा होता जा रहा है, टोल टैक्स का बर्डन बढ़ता जा रहा है और टायर्स भी महंगे होते जा रहे हैं। साथ ही साथ और बहुत से खर्चे हैं जो नॉर्मली दिखाई नहीं देते, बट दे फॉर्म अ सिग्निफिकेंट पार्ट ऑफ द ऑपरेटिंग कॉस्ट। Add all this together and road transport is definitely an expensive business to be in. Thankfully, and on a lighter note, most transporters and truckers are not aware of the actual operating cost of their truck. And like it or not, this is perhaps one of the reasons why the road transport industry is still alive and it is still attracting a lot of people. पिछले कुछ सालों में हमने देखे हैं कई स्टार्टअप्स हैं, कई इंडिविजुअल्स हैं जो रोड ट्रांसपोर्ट इंडस्ट्री में आ गए हैं और आना भी चाह रहे हैं. They see a lot of money, of course, but margins are definitely under a lot of pressure. In our episode today, we will be talking to one such person whose products make a significant part of the operating cost. Trans India will be talking to Mr. Satish Sharma, who is the president of Apollo Tyres for Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa regions. Mr. Sharma is also the chairman of Automotive Tyre Manufacturers Association, also known as APMEA. But before getting into our interview with Mr. Satish Sharma, let us delve further into the operating cost of a truck. कुछ साल पहले तक जो top 2 components थे operating cost के वो थे डीजल और टायर्स. बट टोल टैक्स के आने के बाद जिस गति से देश भर में रोड डेवलपमेंट हुआ है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट हुआ है, टोल टैक्स का बर्डन बढ़ते ही जा रहा है. आज के डेट में डीजल के बाद जो अगला मेजर कंपोनेंट है ऑपरेटिंग कॉस्ट का वो है टोल टैक्स और उसके बाद टायर्स का नंबर आता है. लेकिन फिर भी टायर्स एक बहुत ही इम्पॉर्टेंट एलिमेंट है ऑपरेटिंग कॉस्ट का. टोल टैक्स पर आपका कोई नियंत्रण नहीं है. जो गवर्नमेंट ने टैक्स लगाए हैं वो आपको देने ही होंगे, आप उसमें कुछ बचत नहीं कर सकते. लेकिन टायर्स एक ऐसा कंपोनेंट है जहां पर आप कुछ हद तक बचत कर सकते हैं. ट्रांसपोर्टर्स और ट्रकर्स को ये पता है कि डीजल और टायर्स ही 2 ऐसे कंपोनेंट हैं जहां पर वो कुछ बचत कर सकते हैं. लेकिन कैसे? द रोड ट्रांसपोर्ट इंडस्ट्री कंटिन्यूड विद बायस्ड टायर्स फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम. It took a while for Indian transporters to get through with the idea of using radial tires, and for good reasons. The two factors that were holding the road transport industry from migrating from biased tires to radial tires in a fast manner were poor road conditions and overloading. But over the years, these factors have been taken care of to a large extent. आज हमारे road conditions better हैं और ओवरलोडिंग भी काफ़ी हद तक ख़त्म हो चुका है, बारिंग अ फ्यू सेगमेंट्स ऑफ कोर्स. लेकिन ये जो जर्नी है बायस्ड टायर्स से रेडियल टायर्स तक की, ये कोई आसान जर्नी नहीं थी, ना ही ट्रांसपोर्ट इंडस्ट्री के लिए, ना ही टायर इंडस्ट्री के लिए. इट टुक अ लॉट ऑफ एफर्ट्स, It took a lot of convincing to encourage the transporters and truckers to move from bias tires to radial tires. Convincing the industry that radial tires were more value for money took some time. But for some reason, the road transport industry strongly believes that the tire industry runs a cartel and the manufacturers can increase the prices of tires at will. The other issue with tires is the wear and tear. As far as the use of tires is concerned, there is of course a lot of wear and tear and often permanent damage to the tires. Often transporters keep educating their drivers to ensure to get the maximum life out of their tires. But once the driver is on the road, there is no controlling the driver, nor the road conditions for that matter. But despite the operating costs rising, there seems to be no stopping the road transport industry from growing, and also the commercial vehicle industry for that matter. The month of May was a very good one for all the manufacturers, and all the manufacturers collectively posted good numbers when compared to the previous May. In fact, the numbers of May 22 over May 2021 are so encouraging that we feel that the industry is back on its track to growth. These numbers suggest that the industry is getting back to normal, is getting back to its olden days. And before we get into our exclusive interaction with Mr. Satish Sharma, let's take a quick look at how manufacturers performed in May this year. Market leader Tata Motors reported a 235% increase in domestic sales of commercial vehicles over last year. The company sold 31,414 commercial vehicles in May 2022 as compared to 9,371 commercial vehicles last May. The M&HCV segment reported a growth of 226%, selling 8,409 vehicles. The I&LCV segment reported a growth of 364% with sales of 4,474 vehicles. The passenger carrier segment reported sales of 3,632 vehicles, a rise of 426%, and the SCV cargo and pickup segment reported a growth of 190%, selling 14,899 vehicles. Mahindra & Mahindra reported an increase of 77% in sales of vehicles in the less than 2 ton segment, selling 3,228 vehicles in May 2022. In the 2 to 3.5 ton segment, Mahindra & Mahindra sold 17,289 vehicles, a growth of 231%. The 3 to 5 ton and the M&HCV segment reported sales of 3,645 vehicles, an increase of a staggering 1,240% over last May. VE commercial vehicles, on the other hand, recorded sales of 5,637 vehicles in May 2022 as compared to 1,223 units in May 2021, recording a growth of 361%. This includes 5,504 units of Eicher brand and 133 units of the Volvo brand. Ashok Leyland too reported encouraging numbers in the M&HCV as well as the LCV segment. In the M&HCV truck segment, Ashok Leyland reported sales of 6,639 vehicles, a growth of 386% over last May. In the LCV segment, Ashok Leyland reported a growth of 324%, selling 5,190 vehicles. The bus segment also saw a growth of 380%, with Ashok Leyland selling 629 vehicles in May 2022. Even though the transporters may be feeling the heat because of rising costs, the OEMs seem to have their hands full. There may be multiple reasons for the same. Maybe replacement of vehicles by leading fleet owners, or maybe the impetus and the growth in the infrastructure segment. But as far as the manufacturers are concerned, the tide seems to be in their favor for now. Well friends, in our interview segment, coming up after this very short break, we will be talking to Mr. Satish Sharma from Apollo Tyres, who addresses a lot of issues related to the tire segment and how this industry has evolved over the years. See you on the other side of this break. You are watching Trans India, real people, real emotions.
महिंद्रा ये गारंटी देते हैं कि उनका ब्लेजो एक्स सबसे ज्यादा माइलेज देता है, वरना कर दीजिए ट्रक वापस।
सॉरी अजय, महिंद्रा फ्यूरियो है। एक्शन!
महिंद्रा गारंटी देते हैं कि उनका फ्यूरियो सबसे ज्यादा माइलेज देता है, नहीं तो
एक्चुअली जयो, महिंद्रा जयो है, थोड़ा चेंज है। एंड एक्शन!
महिंद्रा ये गारंटी देते हैं कि उनका जयो सबसे चल क्या रहा है यहाँ पे?
मैम, ये चारों ट्रक ज्यादा माइलेज देते हैं, चारों।
तो ऐसा बोलो ना, ब्लेजो एक्स, फ्यूरियो, फ्यूरियो 7 और जयो, महिंद्रा के ये सभी ट्रक्स देते हैं सबसे ज्यादा माइलेज की गारंटी। नहीं तो कर दीजिए इन्हें वापस। महिंद्रा, देश की सबसे ज्यादा माइलेज देने वाली ट्रक रेंज।
Welcome back to Trans India, real people, real emotions. We are in conversation today with Mr. Satish Sharma, President, Apollo Tyres for Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa regions. Mr. Sharma, as far as the transport industry is concerned, or even the tyre industry for that matter, are we out of the woods? Are these industries back on track?
It's recovering. Out of the wood is a strong statement. It's recovering. The recovery is sharp, and depends on which lens you are measuring the recovery. So on the demand end, we are seeing a cyclical recovery as far as CV is concerned. On the other hand, you have the tractors which have fallen off the cliff. Not completely down, but definitely the heady highs that they had 2 years back, they have come down. Passenger car segment continues to be plagued with the semiconductor chips. Otherwise the demand is better than what it is, what they are able to produce. So overall, I would say that on the demand side, the recovery is happening, and it's happening in the right direction. However, the other end of the story is the inflation, and the inflation has led to a big cost push, and the cost push has not been passed to the market to the extent that the cost push is there. So there's a big phase lag between what the cost needs to be pushed versus the reality, and that's taken an impact on the margins of the industry.
What about the replacement market? How is that shaping up?
So it's a fractured recovery. So anything that has got to do with the infrastructure segment is doing very good. So mining is doing very good. Some of the contact intensive segments which were completely collapsed, for example the bus segment, the people movement had reduced to nothing during the COVID, so the bus segment is now coming up. Likewise, if you look at the e-commerce and vehicles which are associated with the e-commerce, that's doing good. But the larger long haulage segment, as far as CV is concerned, which is the bulk of is still showing moderate signs of recovery. Not very strong as which is there in these segments, but they are more moderate. 1 month they'll seem to give more hope than the other month. So it's a little bit up and down.
Mrs. Sharma, you've been part of the tyre industry for a very long time. How much has this industry evolved, especially in the truck and bus segment?
Yeah, it has been, I would say, there is a good evolution. There is a as far as OEs are concerned, they have adopted radials completely, more or less, barring a few segments like the mining segment, where also we have developed tyres this year for the mining, and soon that bastion will also get, so they're like something like 70% radialized and improving, and their acceleration to the radial technology or adoption is much higher. Replacement is following, and it's at around 50%. So that's what has happened. As far as evolution is concerned, one has seen that, especially the BS4 to BS6 transition, and many of these regulations which came, for example, the axle load, the BS4 to BS6, it's also giving shape to different kind of vehicles, and therefore the tyre technology needs to keep pace with it. And also, if you look at the markets, for example, the e-commerce that we were speaking about, e-commerce as a segment, mining as a segment. So many segments have stood out, they have become more pronounced than earlier. So you need to have tyre technology specific to those big segments which have got into the market prominence now.
Mr. Sharma, the increase in axle load took everybody by surprise, and while nobody was expecting it, the vehicle manufacturers had to undergo a lot of design changes. What about the tyre industry? Did you also have to adjust to accommodate this?
Yeah, one thing which was that there was a non-standard size. Actually, in the if you go through the tire technology standards, then the size was not even existing. So the 1020 gave shape to a different nomenclature called 295 R20. So it is a slightly more bigger tire, same with the rim size being 20 inch, but it can have more volume of air and thereby carry more load. So that was a unique solution which was found by the tire industry in discussion with the OEMs. And again here the transition from 1020 to 295 R20 is happening at a faster pace in OEM, and with replacement doing a follow-up.
Mr. Sharma, the increase in axle load took everybody by surprise. Nobody was prepared for it. So while the OEMs, the vehicle manufacturers, had to undergo some design changes to accommodate this additional load, what was the impact on the tire industry? Did you also have to make changes to the product design?
Apollo Tyres is always in a transition, I should. It's always like any good company, we are always having roadmaps 5 years, 10 years ahead of time. And we are able to see these changes coming in. And we have been preparing ourselves rather strongly. And the fact that we are a global organization, much more than our Indian peers, we have the benefit of working and developing products, developing technology for many matured markets which have already seen these transitions. So we are also ahead of the curve. But coming specifically to India, I would say that our adoption of radial is very, very strong. Not only in TBR, but also in light truck radials, also in pickup radials, in small commercial vehicle radials. So we have straddled the entire commercial vehicle from a 0.5 ton to a 40 tonner or even more with very cutting edge technology. And we have stayed ahead of the curve is what I would say.
Mr. Sharma, do you feel that the Indian industry has been slower to adapt to newer technology, especially the road transport industry?
On the contrary, I would say India might give you that perception of being slow, but when it moves very fast. So, I mean, the typical example would be BS4 to BS6. No country in the world has skipped a transition stage, an emission stage, which is a very, very big thing that India did. If you go outside of tires, then maybe I can give you an example of the mobile, the mobile telephones that came in just when the pager industry had set in, and India completely skipped the pager cycle. We have skipped so many cycles because of technology in different product categories. So India changes very dramatically and very fast. And tires no exception, vehicles are no exception. Probably we'll get into the electric stage. EV vehicles, given the push from the government and the readiness of the industry and the capex which is coming into the EV, maybe much faster than many would anticipate.
Well, while the government decides to make these rapid changes, does it pose a challenge to you as a tire manufacturer?
It's got its pluses and it's got its obviously the stresses. The plus is that the Indian vehicle park is merging with the global vehicle park, which enhances our exporting potential. Because now you're playing, I mean, if the technology, let's say an Indian truck or an Indian automotive made in India is similar to that in the Western world or the developed first world, then you know, your technology of your product is similar, and then you find it therefore easier to marry all the standards present across the world, and therefore your addressable market suddenly improves. Otherwise you are in a certain technology era and the rest of the world is in another technology era. So we are compressing life cycles as a country across product categories. Vehicles and tires being no different. If anything, they are the forerunners in compressing life cycles. So that's the advantage. Obviously, there is the stress at that point in time when you have to commit more R&D cost. You have to commit more. You have to be flexible. You have to show a lot of nimbleness, and at times you may not be able to do it, but then of course so far I think all these pushes have worked for the industry rather than against it. I mean, for this BS4 to BS6, a typical example, no company is saying I am not able to do it, and everybody said it'll be too difficult, but everybody finally managed to do it.
It has been seen in the last few years that the costs for the transport industry have been on a steady rise, be it fuel costs, be it toll tax, or even tires for that matter. What steps is Apollo Tyres taking to ensure that its customers get a better cost per kilometer or get more out of the tires?
Yeah, I think in a way it's a good thing that the cost is going up, and I'll qualify my answer from a certain aspect. Of course, it's never good that cost goes up for a fleet, but what it does is that the consciousness of the fleet on the usage of the tyre increases.
We have seen what Floyd is all about and how it aims to help the
engineering
transporters.
technology.
But what are the figures?
Really
how many cases has lots attended to,
but
and what has been the savings for this industry? We'll continue this interaction on the other side of this break. You are watching Trans India, real people, real emotions.
I met many personal users, they don't even know the brand of tires they're riding on. Forget anything else. I mean, they unless they get a flat, they are not even bothered about. So that's almost an apathy to the product. Of course, in commercial vehicles, more. But even there, the care and maintenance that is needed for the product is so. As the cost goes up, this sensitivity increases. So we find now they're talking more about, and therefore, as a manufacturer, we are able to help them in trying to understand which is the right product for my usage condition, because not one size fits all, unfortunately. It might look like one black hole, but it's not the case. I mean, we have, like we were talking about segmentations, and different segments have evolved in the country. A tire which you need for a e-commerce regional application is a very different from the one that you need for mining or long haulage. And now with multi-axles happening, which tire position on which axle needs what kind. So it's all become very complex, and it needs more understanding of your, then you need the understanding of your driver habits, you need the understanding of the terrain, then if you're running on a time dimension, your load, then what is the kind of product, how to use that product, what's the inflation pressure, how do I make sure that the tire gives me the what is expected out of it. And just this focus can change performance parameters by 30 to 40%, as big as that. So you have to be, and we are now hearing a lot of fleets talking about, can you manage the entire tire bit for us, or should we hire tire managers? Many of them put, workforce exclusively to manage tires. So that's consciousness is going up, but still a long way to go.
महिंद्रा ये गारंटी देते हैं कि उनका ब्लेजो एक्स सबसे ज्यादा माइलेज देता है, वरना कर दीजिए ट्रक वापस।
सॉरी अजय, महिंद्रा फ्यूरियो है। एक्शन।
महिंद्रा गारंटी देते हैं कि उनका फ्यूरियो सबसे ज्यादा माइलेज देता है, नहीं तो
एक्चुअली जयो, महिंद्रा जयो है, थोड़ा चेंज है। एंड एक्शन।
महिंद्रा ये गारंटी देते हैं कि उनका जियो सबसे। चल क्या रहा है यहाँ पे?
मैम, ये चारों ट्रक ज्यादा माइलेज देते हैं, चारों।
तो ऐसा बोलो ना, ब्लेजो एक्स, फ्यूरियो, फ्यूरियो 7 और जयो। महिंद्रा के ये सभी ट्रक्स देते हैं सबसे ज्यादा माइलेज की गारंटी, नहीं तो कर दीजिए इन्हें वापस। महिंद्रा, देश की सबसे ज्यादा माइलेज देने वाली ट्रक रेंज।
There was a time when transporters and truckers had to be educated on the use of radial tires. In fact, I remember being part of a journey where we covered 125 cities across India, telling the transporters and truckers the benefits of radial tires. Do you think we are past that stage now and no more drilling is required as far as the use of radial tires is concerned?
I would say that we have passed that stage but there are other manifestations. For example, there's a general belief now that if I'm paying more for a radial, it should perform more than a bias. So it should carry more load than a bias. For example, I have paid 30% more price, it should carry 30% more load. That's not true. I mean, the product is made for longer life, for giving you a better fuel efficiency for the same load.
Right.
It's not going to, just because you've paid 30% more, it's not, because our bias tires are actually designed for very aggressive conditions. So radial actually cannot take those kind of aggressive conditions. So on the contrary, you should reduce your loading. It's more for the higher speeds. It's more for the fuel efficiency. It's more for retreadability. So the whole dimension changes. So that aspect of discussion is now on. They all understand that radials are better than bias. So we have crossed that hump. But many other areas have come manifested. And like I said, the many segments have evolved. And then all radials are not the same. So for example, there is a new thing in radial technology which was not there in bias, which is called an all-wheel tire. Now, there is in a certain application, you can fit the same product on different axle positions. Now, that's gained a lot of power. But again, you need to understand your application to know where to fit. So there's a lot more nuances. In that sense, unfortunately, it's more complex, and therefore it needs more advisory, more understanding. And that's a journey which needs to be traveled.
So does Apollo Tyres help its fleet owners in choosing the right tire for the right vehicle, right application? What is the process like?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So we have, from the day we went onto radials, we knew that the work with the end user needs to be increased. And we came out with a specialist workforce, which we call as CV Forza. So it's a force of people in our team which is specialized to, and we have these specialists on the field which do the work with the fleets, with the end users, and educating them, and so on and so forth. We've also worked a lot in creating a service infrastructure. So we are, as far as our distribution footprint is concerned, we have a specialized network which is called as a CV zone, commercial vehicle zone, which has got all the service facilities. Incidentally, it's also the only certified, they've got an IRF certification which is higher than an ISO certification also. It's done by TUV of Germany. So they've certified all our CV zones on providing service in a standardized way. So a lot of work has been done there. Then we have got established retreading zones. We have established expert tire fitters. So a whole lot of ecosystem has been established, which sets us apart from the other competing players. And that's the direction in which we are going.
How many manufacturing facilities does Apollo Tyres have currently?
We have 4 in India and 2 in Europe currently.
Mr. Sharma, the government has imposed a hefty 28% GST on tyres. Do you think it is justified putting tyres in the topmost bracket?
Finally, it's for the government to decide. What we can say is that lower the taxation is always a better idea. And now that there is a more compliance of GST, and we are seeing the GST going up, so hopefully the slabs will get restructured, etc. Tire being an input to a vehicle, technically should have a lower slab, at least one slab lower than whatever it is for the vehicle. So that's the logic that we were thinking when it was announced, that tire could be one slab lower than the final, because that's the value addition then, and you tax the higher value addition. So, but now it's settled. I mean, from the time that we also understand that tires is a derived demand. In that sense, it's also a good, revenue for the government, and they also have to earn their revenue somewhere to put it back into. But yeah, technically, it could be one slab lower.
Mr. Sharma, with the highways across India getting better and the government giving a huge push to infra development, again all across India, how do you see these developments impacting the tyre industry?
So again, I see, with the infrastructure improving, the GDP improves. The GDP improves, the tire industry is directly a beneficiary of the GDP, you know. When you have roads ahead of time, speed improves. When the speed improves, you have to design your tires to those changing conditions. So there's going to be a higher heat buildup. Radials will find more favor over the bias. And within the world of radials, you would have more accent coming onto fuel efficiency than on the loading. So those are the several aspects of the game which need to get continuously optimized for the changing infrastructure of the country.
Well, there has been a myth over the years that radial tires cannot be retreaded. Can you give some clarity on that, and what can ideally be the life of a radial tire?
Yeah, so the clarity is a simple, it's absolutely it's a myth, like you said. If it is a myth, it needs to be busted. At least in the field, I do not see any such question. So maybe in the earlier days of radials, this used to come out. Because the product was also not product technology at that time, nor the vehicle technology. So those were still early days. Even retreaders didn't know how their toolings were more towards the bias tires. So the retreading technology is improved. Radials can be retreaded very, very easily. And you would be surprised to know, for example, in the US, there is something called as 5 lakh kilometer warranty. So, because their roads are straight, you know, from east coast to the west coast, you don't have any turns and everything. So tires give a lot of life. So the first plus second plus third life all put together is equal to 5 lakhs. So and it's 100% radialized market. So retreadability is definitely, the radial casing is such that it supports retreadability more than bias actually.
Well friends, that's it from Trans India this week. Next week we shall continue our interaction with Mr Satish Sharma and know more about some contentious issues that go with the tire industry, be it cartelization and even import of tires. So make sure you watch our episode next week. But before you go, don't forget to subscribe to Trans India, real people, real emotions. And until next week, stay safe. Jai Hind.